So the economic situation for a lot of millennials is actually not so great. I mean, for example, we face lower wages, higher rent, higher prices for commodities, food, fuel. We've got student loan debt. We're actually bogged down by that, and a lot of bad job prospects. We don't nearly have as good as job prospects as previous generations. To put it bluntly, millennials have been fucked. Now, look, it's not just millennials, of course. Previous generations have also seen their wages decline. In fact, over the last 30 years, we have seen wages that have stagnated while worker productivity has increased. Now, a lot of that, of course, has to do with Ronald Reagan tax cuts, deregulation, the influence of money in politics, and we've also seen, as wages decrease, something else has happened. Labor. The share of people in labor unions has also decreased. Now, that actually can be correlated with the fact that wages have been stagnant. Workers haven't been able to get ahead because they no longer have representation in the workplace. Now, millennials, interestingly enough, they have this thing called the internet, and they can actually research and see what the hell's going on. Like, what happened to our wages? Why were wages better back in the 70s and 80s? Well, one reason is because labor unions. So now millennials are joining labor unions at a higher rate. In fact, according to the Economic Policy Institute, 76% of new union members in 2017 were now younger than 35. So they're part of the millennial generation. Now, according to the same article, these numbers represent a significant break with recent history. Younger workers have always been less likely than older ones to be unionized, and this is still the case. However, roughly 8% of workers under 34 are union members, compared to with around 13% of workers 35 or older, but that is beginning to change. Nearly 1 in 4 new jobs among younger workers in 2017 was a union job. Now, recent polling also suggests that young workers identify with organized labor. Last year, Pew Research found that 75% of 18 to 29-year-olds, including 55% of young Republicans, which are actually more liberal than older Republicans, have favorable views of labor unions. In fact, look, there's been a lot of discussion that labor unions are not only needed, but they're actually necessary. And this is from an article in the Business Insider. So we need strong unions to counterbalance corporations, to counterbalance corporate executives. It's not because we hate corporate executives. It's because there is an imbalance of power in the workplace. And when people actually get together and fight for their own benefits, things like that, well, then guess what? You actually do get better benefits and better pay, things like that. So now, John Schmidt, who's the vice president of the Economic Policy Institute, he said that there is a reason why younger people are looking to labor unions. They said that the difficult economic landscape facing young people and a growing sense of powerlessness is an obvious reason why unions are getting a bump. He said, quote, "It is possible that the imagination of young people has been sparked." Well, I would say that is absolutely correct. You do have a lot of younger people that see what's going on in the marketplace. We don't have, the legacy unions or legacy membership that some people have, or the legacy pay. We're starting out at the bottom of the totem pole, and it's actually very, very harsh and very unforgiving to new workers. In fact, newer workers often get paid much, much less than newer workers had in previous times. So I guess let me give you an example. Let me kind of explain that. Some newer workers in some manufacturing plants, for example, they get hired in at $9 an hour, whereas 5 years previously, or 5 or 10, give or take, however long you want to put, those same workers, well, not the same workers, but workers that were hiring in as new workers at the same place would often get start out at $10, $11 an hour. So those wages have continued to decrease for newer workers. So that's gotten a lot of these younger millennials, these newer workers, to go, hey, wait a minute, we need to even the playing field. And the best way to do so is to be in a union. In fact, a lot of people are more receptive to the idea of being in a union in order to counterbalance to the people or the power of the people that they end up working for. Now, I want to attest to this personally because I was in a union. And unsurprisingly, what happened? I got paid more, I had better benefits, and I was actually treated more like a valued worker than when I had worked at a non-unionized factory. And I've shared details on this before. I had received, like I said, better benefits, better insurance, better pay, and was actually responsible for a little bit less than I was at a non-union shop. So, and that's because, of course, we had the ability to, if we had a problem, take it up with our union representative, and they would bring our concerns to management, and they would work something out. Without that, you were basically at the mercy of your boss. That's why I always be on the side of labor unions. Now, Schmidt also points out that the industries that are experiencing the most overall growth in unionization, including the public sector, construction, information, and education. So I think manufacturing could also use a bump in labor representation. Let me give you an example of where unions exist and where they work in manufacturing. GM, for example, has a union, right? Now, they made $1.2 billion in profit the last year. Now, they have a profit-sharing program that's negotiated by this union. So let me tell you how much the workers got from this profit-sharing program. They received a bonus of nearly $12,000. That is $12,000. Not $1,200, $12,000. That sure as hell beats the hell out of the $1,000 bonus that these companies are crowing about when it comes to the tax cuts. And look, in a lot of places, you didn't even get that bonus. You had to be there, for example, at Walmart for 20 years in order to get that $1,000 bonus. But if you're a GM worker and your company does better and they have a profit sharing program, they will give you $12,000 for helping out the company. If that's not a reason to unionize, I don't know what is. I actually believe that the company should share the profits with their workers. Now, here's the thing, right? Again, we need a counterbalance in order to bring fairness to the workers. Now, unfortunately, the workers don't have this power because the elites want to keep it, and they have done everything in their power to be able to keep this power, including paying off politicians and corporate Democrats. And look, you've seen the Democratic Party distance themselves from labor before. Remember President Obama wanted to put on his walking shoes and promised to walk the picket line if they tried to put in right to work in Wisconsin? Where were you, President Obama? They put in right to work in Wisconsin, and you weren't there. Same thing with Michigan. You weren't there. You weren't there during the assault on labor. Where were you? You were helping the corporations that were crushing labor. And look, they also do other things other than right to work. The Supreme Court is going to take up, possibly take up a case that could allow you to not pay union dues and still benefit from union contracts in these shops. So basically, what? You get to freeload off what the union has actually done. So that's a disaster. And that's, of course, going to hurt the power of organized labor. But young people joining into labor, which is the only good thing that we've seen, could actually be a huge deal. Because right now, we got unions in this country that are barely hanging on. And there has been, unfortunately, a pervasive idea spread by business owners that unions are bad. Well, I guess if you're the company, of course you would see representation as a terrible thing. But here's some of the things that they talk about. Oh, my God, these unions are terrible. They only defend lazy workers. They're hurting the company, and then they funneled money to the Democrats who despise you. Well, to be fair, they have given money to Democrats, although it was reported on Jimmy Dore show, actually, and this wasn't, actually it was on Aggressive Progressive, sorry. But Jimmy Dore had reported on labor unions that have decided, you know what, we're going to leave the Democratic Party because they're not serving labor anymore. And that's the thing. Democrats had traditionally served labor, but now they realize that they can get far more in campaign donations if they beg corporations for money. So they have left labor in the dust, and they've gone to go work for their corporate overlords. So now if I had it my way, by the way, on funding, okay, so if you're a Republican, you work in a union shop, you don't want your money to go to Democrats. I understand. So why don't we work together to get the money out of politics? That means no union money in politics, no union money going to corporate or going to politicians. But on the other hand, you also have no corporate money going to politicians as well. The only money that goes to politicians is money that you send them. Publicly financed elections. Maybe that's something that young Republicans might be in favor of. I don't know. But again, if I'd eliminate those donations completely. So you eliminate that argument completely. As far as defending lazy workers, yeah, sometimes that happens. But most of the time they defend workers that are also good workers too. So there's a balance, you give or take. But they are there to defend you and to make sure that you get fair wages and fair benefits for a fair day's work. And so if you want that, unionize, get together. So ultimately, this is actually a pretty good trend. And I hope to see it continue. I hope to see more young people unionize and fight for labor rights. Because right now, we need a strong labor union in this country. And, you know, because if there were any time in the country's history where we would need one, it would be right now. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.